right. Welcome to Empowering Texas Voters, a journey through voting issues, the podcast that brings you diverse perspectives on the intricacies of voting. Your host, Elaine Campbell, and myself, AJ Cole, will bring on esteemed guests and members of the League of Women Voters of Dallas. We aim to educate and empower people of all walks of life. Join us as we dive into the nuances of voting rights, explore voter suppression challenges, and highlight the importance of civic engagement. Get ready for informative conversations that will inspire you to make a difference in our democracy. Let's embark on this empowering journey together. Shall we get started?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, AJ. I'm Elaine Campbell, Vice President of Voter Services and Education for the League of Women Voters Dallas. And I am very honored, we are very honored to have Latecia Hill with us today. And we are going to talk about today about reentry and as it relates to voting. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's
Latecia.
Always a pleasure when I get to sit down and have conversation about important issues with a buddy. So I look forward to it.
So, if you don't mind, Latecia, could you elaborate a little bit about your story with the criminal law system and how it has impacted your life, particularly when it comes to voter right restoration?
So, my story. I was born and raised a Southern California girl. Grew up there under the family values given to me by my small farm town, rural East Texas grandparents who had migrated there in the early 40s. I came here to Texas as an adult with adult children. My daughter was in college. My sons were on their way to high school. I had worked a very successful corporate career for some of the major lending institutions across this country. And we're at a place where I was ready to define what that second half of life was going to look like. And because I was raised by giving people, faithful folks, I knew service was in that second half. And just as I went to put my toe in the water, it was like the world opened up and swallowed me whole. At age 50, I had just turned 50 in January. In April of that very same year, there was a knock at my door, and it was the FBI, and they were coming to ruin my life. And at the time, I was certain, and I stood in the boldness and confidence of, surely you're mistaken. But nope, that's not how that happened. Given the criminal system here in our country, that I am not going to say is flawed, I'm not going to say is broken, I'm saying is operating exactly by design. I was given two choices. And though I didn't have as much as a speeding ticket on my record prior, I could either fight and lose, because my crime was one count of conspiracy, which if you do your research, there was no crime, there was no victim, there was a story that was told. So I could either fight it, and I was going to lose, and they were going to offer me 20 years in a federal prison, or I can do something that I was taught never to do, and that was to tell a lie. And I told a lie on myself to save myself. It is the most painful thing in my life that I've ever had to do, because I come from humble beginnings. We didn't have much. Our word was our bond. We were taught to be civically engaged at a very young age. I tell the story now when I give my civics classes about my grandpa, because he took so much pride in the fact that he knew the mayor, right? And though he was a transplant to the big city from the small farm town, he knew the mayor, and he knew the power that went with that. And he was able to move things and show by example, even though I didn't understand it at the time it was all happening. So I'm all over the place now. Let me go back to how I got here, right? So I was forced to take a plea, and even the prosecutor in my case, no one expected me to go to prison. Like I said, I had 20 years professional experience, a whole community of people to support me. I come from a village family. No one expected that. And I'll never forget, the judge asked me, how I felt about what I had done. And I couldn't take ownership because I hadn't done anything. And I told him my truth. And my truth was, not only had I not done anything, I didn't know that anything had been done. And if I had, I'm going to tell you. But he thought I was lying, and he said so audibly. And because I showed no remorse for a crime that I did not commit, he gave me the maximum of that plea deal. That plea deal was 0 months to 3 years. So he gave me the maximum of 3 years, sentenced me to federal prison. I spent 22 months behind bars at Carswell, right here in Fort Worth. And I was released early through the pandemic under the CARES Act, and spent 8 months on home confinement with an ankle monitor. Which is a whole nother issue. There was a point in time that I had told my family, if they call me one more time and threaten me one more time, I'm going to re-surrender myself, because I couldn't take it. So, after experiencing that horrible, traumatic episode of life, I was angry. I had worked really hard. I had achieved the goals, far exceeded them, right? And it was all taken away in one fell swoop. And I was told that the truth would always set me free, and that it hadn't happened for me. So while in prison, I learned, hey, Latecia, get over yourself. You are not the only person, by a long shot, that this type of thing happens to. And you are privileged because you do have a village family and comrades and relationships and just skills and ability, right? So I'm quick to appoint myself when I see a need. So I made a pact with some really beautiful ladies who were on the other side of the wall, y'all. Some of them because of things that they have done. Some of them, just like me, caught up, right? And I promised them that I would not stop using this mouthpiece to share and raise awareness and get people involved. I'm a 60s baby, meaning, so I bring a Gen X perspective to this thing. And that's what brought me here, right? So my reentry after I was released from prison, I never thought I would have a problem, right? My goal was, Latecia, just live long enough to get through this and get on the other side of the gate. But it was on the other side of the gate that the real problem started, right? Because now I've got a felony on my record and a global exclusionary flag because I'm arch enemy number 1. They say you should be very afraid of me, right? For a white collar, non-violent crime. even though I have 25 years banking experience, I can't get a job as a greeter at a big box store, right? All because of a background check. I can't feed myself. I can't house myself. And if it weren't for my grown children who do very well and love and take care of their dear old mom, I'd be houseless and hungry and doing some peculiar things, just trying to survive, right? Can't be that hard. So I joined a group down in Austin called Statewide Leadership Council. They were advocating for clean slate legislation. All of that rang great for me, even though the work that they do was not going to help me because I was a federal inmate. It didn't matter. It gave me an in, right? From there, I now sit on the steering committee, the board steering committee at the Statewide Leadership Council, and we are preparing currently raising awareness and just doing training for the community at large of how to get engaged, how to have your voice heard, how to address our elected officials, how to rally and bring our voices together to create power, right? So through that, we went national, and I am the Hot 10 team lead for the Dallas area for a group called Time Done. Time Done is in 5 states total, Dallas being one. In Dallas, we are separated in 10 regions because we're a big state. So I serve as the Texas, Dallas Hot 10 lead for Time Done, and they too advocate for clean slate legislation on a national level. We have an event coming soon. I don't know when this is airing, so I'm not even going to say. What else do I do? Locally, I was led through all of my policy advocacy work and stomping the Capitol in Austin to come right back to my local neighborhood, right? I live in Garland, so I started the Gateway Alliance project aimed at improving the roads of reentry for women, providing diversion alternatives for at-risk girls, and just raising awareness of the need for us to be engaged in our local communities. And that primarily is through voter education and registration, which is how I met this lovely lady.
Right.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to just take a breath and thank you for sharing your story. Every time we share our story, it is re-traumatizing. And I really do know that that's vulnerable, and just really thank you for that. So I just want to take a breath and just say thank you.
I
for sharing
appreciate
your
that.
story.
And you say that, and I appreciate it. I some days I can tell it, and it's fine.
Yeah.
And some days it's just so sad, right?
Yeah.
I never thought. I grew up in a nice, beautiful bubble, Santa Monica, 4 blocks from the ocean, right? We didn't have a care in the world. I worked really hard. I never thought that it could happen.
Right.
And not only does it happen, it happens often.
A lot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now, and I know this because, as you know, this is how we met. Latecia is a voter deputy registrar, a VDR. She, of course, is a registered voter. She's also an election judge. She was my election clerk, and then she was a judge at her own facility as well. So we need to get tissues whenever we're doing this.
Yes.
We don't have any, and I
you know what?
apologize.
It's okay. I am fine. I am used to.
It's our first one, so we need to remember that.
Yes.
I am used to demonstrating my emotions in public and let
Which
them
is a
come
beautiful thing. and there's-
however they come.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful thing to do. So regarding, because you have done all of those things, as you mentioned, I want us to talk a little bit about, because every state has different laws on reentry relating to voting. So can you walk us through a little bit what the rules are in Texas for people who have a felony on their record.
Yeah, they have laws, actually, like you said, on both ends of the spectrum. Some states, it's a wrap, you don't ever get to vote again, whatever. Some states, the moment you walk out of the gate,
You get to vote.
you get to vote, even if you're on probation. Here in the state of Texas, they kind of fall right in the middle, right? If you have been convicted of a felony and you have fully served whatever penalties went with that conviction, whether it be incarceration, whether it be supervised release, whether it be probation, if you have completed all of those things, you are 100% eligible to vote. And I would encourage you to get out and get registered right away because we need you. Our voices together can really move the needle and make significant change in these areas where we say, you know, there's so much harm and so much trauma, and there's so many of us that are now experiencing it. Because even if you're not directly impacted, you know somebody, whether you're willing to admit it in public or not, right? Yeah. The statistics are catching up with us. It's a growing problem. It's at a crisis in this country, and we have the ability to do something about it if we use the avenues that were provided, right. And that is the democratic process in voting.
Yeah, interesting that you said that. About 5 years ago, if someone had asked me, do you know anyone who was formerly incarcerated, I would have said no. When I've started engaging and becoming an activist and an advocate for human rights, and then making my focus people who, specifically people who present themselves as women, my lane is women, and children and girls. But when I started specifically working on that, I have now many people, many friends, because people will come to me who I didn't know.
Yes.
Because there's a stigma around it. So you are correct when you say everyone knows at least, I believe it's more, but at least one person who is formerly incarcerated. Everyone does.
Yeah.
There's just no question about it.
Yeah.
Because that is especially if you live in Texas, because we have the most incarcerated women than any other state in this country.
And the numbers are growing.
Yeah.
And it's not just women. It is brown and black women
specifically targeting brown and black women
disproportionately. And that leads into conversations that are not subject for this podcast today. Right. But it's a big problem.
But it is the reason why it's so important for us to be engaged in the democratic process. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that people may face. I know that I have spoken to people who were actually told when they received their felony, you will no longer vote. It's a flat-out lie. Have you experienced any of those types of things or any challenges when you were trying to get re-engaged in the voting process?
It's kind of quirky, right? Because each situation is uniquely different, and some people will have probation for life. So technically, they will not be eligible to vote because they will still be on active probation.
That's true.
So that's the only space where I could see that might be a rub. But you're right. The very things that you spoke of, all of the shame and all of the stigma and all of the perceptions from society when you come home. It's like you walk in and you think you've got a giant billboard on your forehead and everyone knows, and your self-worth is not there. You get the imposter syndrome as soon as you walk into the room. You don't ask the right questions, and you accept the first rejection because you expected it when you walked in the door. So yes, there are people who have gone out specifically to be VDRs and are told, nope, you can't do it. And because they haven't done their due diligence, right? That's the key. If we cannot be passionate or even be successful on something if we don't know the ins and outs of what it is that we're fighting for. So we have to be diligent about discovering all of the available information and using it as we are creating the choices and the decisions that we're going to make when we go and use our voices at the poll. But you cannot make your decisions and choices because of what Miss Jolene down the street said she thought she heard at the beauty salon, right? Because that's how we share that type of information, unfortunately, in some of our communities. We don't even need to go into what happens on Sunday mornings, right? So I would advise everyone to study for yourself, right? Whatever is important to you, go and Google it. At bare bones minimum, start there. Get information, be informed so you can make solid decisions about what you're passionate about.
Well, I have to do a plug for Vote 411.
Yes.
It is an amazing site, and it is a place where you are able to find out if you're registered, how you register, who's on your ballot, what the requirements are, what the ID requirements are, all of those things.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. It's a great source. I use it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything that you...
Yeah, actually, this is a really fascinating topic. So, when I first moved to Texas, I had been arrested and threatened with a felony, and ended up being, I had the privilege of fighting it. And I thought the same thing. I truly thought I would never be able to vote again. I mean, I saw my life flash before my eyes. And I mean, I would like to believe that I knew a little bit. I was always very civically engaged before that. So I do think a lot of people think that once they have a felony charge that they can't vote again. And I know it's different in every state, but I think it's just stressing that importance, getting that out there as widely as possible, I think will be huge. So I know you have a huge undertaking.
It's a challenge, right? Because we've been conditioned for so long. And then here I come saying, no. And they're,
Suspect.
Right? Yeah.
One of the things that Latecia is also working on is with a group that actually we now have a vote center at the Dallas County Jail.
Yes.
Because if you don't have a felony, but you are in jail on election day, you still have a constitutional right to vote. So now we have a vote center in the jail. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that struggle.
I am so happy to be amongst the very tenacious, innovative justice seekers here in our city, because they are so right. Until you have that felony conviction, it is your right to be able to vote. And we need to be able to hold these jails accountable for having practices and procedures and staffing and all of the things necessary, even if it need to be on a volunteer basis for those days of the year that elections take place. But to provide access, and to provide access throughout the entire day. One of the challenges that were had with the first set of voters who used the in-house poll, they were only offered very early in the morning. And so it was very easy for people to decline waking up super early to get dressed to go down to vote. So that was a thing. IDs were an issue because I never could figure out, how can the jail say that they cannot vouch for the identity of a person that they are holding, and right? It just doesn't add up to me, but that's just me. But that's a problem, right? They can't clearly verify the identity of the person. What were some of the other challenges? There's no one really there just to assist with if you wanted to do a mail-in ballot, right, which would be a much easier process. There's no one to help to complete those forms and share timelines and deadlines and things like that. So it's a work in process for sure. But there's a great group of individuals working really hard, pushing really firm on the elections department, on the sheriff's department, on the jails to say, hey, these people are our brothers and sisters and they have rights just like everybody else. Yeah.
So you mentioned, one thing you mentioned when you were talking about the things you were working on is clean slate legislation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So in the United States, there are 70 million Americans with a criminal record, right? Not necessarily they went to prison, but they have a record. In the state of Texas, there are 9 million of us, right? And there are over 45,000 collateral consequences that keep us out of safe, affordable housing, fair chance employment, access to health care benefits, and food deprivation, all of the things. We look around and we see that the public safety in our communities is, in my personal opinion, not improving, right? Yet we are incarcerating people by the masses under the guise of improving public safety, right? So clean slate legislation says a person has the right for redemption. They have done their time, whatever that was. They have been fully released from all of their supervised probation, what have you. After a certain period of time, now we would like to see, as soon as all that stuff happens, our record should be clear because we've served our debt to society. But we know that that's far-reaching. So, okay, let's give a time period that says if this amount of time passes and there are no subsequent convictions, then that person's rights fully, records cleared, automatically, not by petition, which is convoluted at best.
And expensive.
Very expensive. And doesn't always work the way that it's planned out to, because let's just face it, the records, right? The records within each jurisdiction that has to clear those things, that's a big part of the problem for automation right now, right? So there are groups that are working to fix that. So time done in clean slate legislation says after we have done the time, after we have exhausted this period of time, restore us. Our time is done. Period.
Yeah. We know people who have, we all do, but you may not know them, but we know people who committed a crime 30 plus years ago, have never done anything since, lived a wonderful life, and they still are unable to rent an apartment because that is on their record.
Yes.
So as the lead for Time Done, the things you're working on with Clean Slate, what you're doing with your own nonprofit, Gateway Alliance. And next year is a legislative year.
Yes.
So what are some things that you are working on right now that you want to tell people about, help people get engaged with,
Absolutely.
help people understand that even if you are not off paper yet, they can still help you?
For sure. We are going hard in the paint. In the next 6 months, I am working collaboratively with several organizations throughout the state to just do just that, right? Give people information, get people registered, get out in the communities and create community. So we have a 6-month series, once a month for an hour. We're going to be covering different subjects aimed at preparing the everyday average person sitting in their home to plug in and get engaged and help with the fight, right? So I know that I want to say it's July the 21st. The Texas Inmates Family Association is sponsoring the first segment of that training, and it's going to be storytelling because...
We'll look it up. I think it's the 20th, but we'll look it up and we could
Yes, please do.
advertise it. Because I'm actually on this group with her. I'm helping Latecia with this. And, well, as representing the league, we're going to talk about voting.
So storytelling, what we found in our advocacy work is that, you can have all the petitions in the world signed and you can have all the relationships in the world, but it is those real life experiences, those shared stories. So we want to make sure to help folks craft those stories in ways that will lend to what we're trying to do. So that's going to start. Elaine's going to check on it. TIFA, Texas Inmate Family Association. It's going to be hosted by Savannah Pearson of Be Frank for Justice, David Johnson of CAST, which is... Good grief.
Actually, I can pull up the flyer.
That drives me nuts. And Maggie Luna, who is the executive director for the Texas Harm Reduction Alliance. And they are all based out of Savannah's in Houston. But they're down there and they work very well together. They've got a great storytelling module that they've put together. And so I would encourage everyone to try to get out to see that. Yes, All Rise 2025 advocacy training. It is going on the 20th of July from 11 to 1 via Zoom. And if you go on to the TIFA Facebook page, I'm sure that you can find the registration link for that, but I promise you that's going to be a good one. We also are doing in August here in Dallas, Time Done is coming to Dallas. Yay. And it's the first time that they've been here, and I've kind of held him out for a minute because I'm very protective of my neighborhoods, but I'm so excited that they're coming. It's going to be a big resource fair, kind of block party style. We're going to have local performers, fun stuff for the kids. The horses are coming out. We're inviting all the riding groups just to get to know each other. Let's get outside, y'all. We don't do that anymore, right? And while we're out there, let's have some fun. There'll be free food from one of the food trucks, and I would like to say all, but I will definitely say 90% of all of the vendors and people associated with this showing are formerly incarcerated.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah, it makes it really nice.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to what we're going to do next.
So do I.
Yeah.
Thank you.